Hello, and welcome to 5 Year Club video number 190. We have another story from the Japanese Family Storehouse today. I read it ahead of time, so I'd like to just warn you, the story is a bit sexist. Japan has problems with sexism, and this book's 333 years old, and they had problems with sexism back 333 years ago, so I don't agree with a lot of the kind of ideas that the author talks about in this book. However, there's enough interesting stuff in here and also enough kind of good stuff that people were even talking about 333 years ago that I still think it's fun to read because you get these weird descriptions from a long time ago. And also you see that like people were struggling with exactly the same stuff that we struggle with now, just 333 years ago, and there's nothing new under the sun. The same stuff keeps happening over and over again on planet Earth. It's just we don't realize it because any single human will live like, I don't know, say 80 years, and maybe only 40 of those years you're actually paying attention. The other 40 you're, either a kid and paying attention to that world, or you're old and paying it, you might not be all there anymore, or you've got health problems and those concern you. So we tend to not realize that stuff has happened before and that there are already very good solutions and very predictable outcomes depending upon our behavior. Ray Dalio talks about this in his book, in his recent book called Principles. Is it called Principles? And he decided that he wanted to study the history of markets to help him do well in investing, and now he's a billionaire. So I think it's useful for us to look into the past, don't you? Sounds good. All right, let's go. A lucky draw from the world of greed. Take care. Kingdoms are destroyed by bandits, houses by rats, and widows by suitors. Marriages are not matters for haste. Nowadays, a marriage broker is no longer a friendly mediator, but a businesswoman who makes a profit in proportion to the bride's dowry. If the sum is 50 kanmei, she claims a commission of 5. To pay out a tenth of a dowry like this as extras before sending your daughter to her suitor's house may well break the back of your finances. Marrying off your daughter is a piece of business you may expect to do only once in a lifetime, and, bearing in mind that none of the losses are recoverable later, you should approach the matter with extreme caution. A glance at the world about will quickly reveal that a rich man who is modest in the display of his wealth is a rare phenomenon, and that those who cut a fine figure on a slender income are more in the fashion of these degenerate times. I love that sentence, because that sentence is exactly what you can read about when Dave Ramsey says something like, big hat, no cattle. That people who are paying attention to building wealth, who are paying attention to building efficient businesses, systems that do productive labor in the world and help the world, but who do not look like anything special on the outside, those people are rare. Whereas, people who are trying to look good in a sports car or in a suit, or I don't know, what else is there? I mean, you got the teenagers buying like the $200-$300 sneakers or whatever. There's plenty of those. It is the easier thing to find. We'll keep reading now. As soon as their sons arrive at a marriageable age, parents turn their minds to house repairs and interior decorations which they have never been able to afford before, buy new stocks of household equipment, hire extra men servants and maids, and seek to give an impression of splendid prosperity. All their hopes are centered on a bride's dowry, which it is their secret and disreputable purpose to use as capital in business deals. To give the right impression, they travel everywhere in palanquins, and all their family and distant relatives join in the extravagant display, determined to be outdone by no one. Their useless expenditure mounts and mounts till even The wherewithal to patch a hole in the roof is gone, and the house falls about them in ruins. The parents of eligible daughters, for their part, are no better. For them, only families far above their own station are good enough. And, in addition to consideration of wealth, they make inquiries for a son-in-law who is an artistic genius and strikingly handsome into the bargain. But an adept at no drums is an adept at dice. A young clerk of fashion who will never get out of the habit of visiting brothels, and a man who wins acclaim for his elegant manners at parties is likely to spend your fortune on theater boys. So here's a side note. I skipped to the notes to read about that. So theater boys in feudal Japan, in the context of when this book was written, were known for having homosexual sex with people. That's the terminology that the note in the back of the book uses. And I gotta say, this is a pretty harsh judgment by this author. A man who wins acclaim for his elegant manners at parties is likely to spend your fortune on theater boys? What the fuck? Like, you have manners and therefore that doesn't follow. Like, somehow it's good to not have manners? I don't know. That's one reason why this story is kind of like, eh. When you think of it, if you seek a son-in-law who is handsome, sharp in business, a social success, and a model of filial piety untouched by scandal and a blessing to mankind, where will you find such a creature? Besides, too many good qualities can be embarrassing. Even people of exalted station have their shortcomings, and with lesser beings it is doubly so. 5 faults in 10 should be overlooked. A man may be short and bald, but if he has a gift for sales talk, and has not diminished the fortune of his father left him, he is a suitable prospect for marriage. That's the young man who married Mr. So-and-so's daughter of such and such a business, people will exclaim, as, on one of the 5 festival days, some fashionable fellow passes bravely by, his overskirt and starched jacket impeccably arranged, a small gold-wrought dagger next his crested silken kimono, a procession of boys and clerks bearing luggage boxes in his wake. Remarks of this kind gladden the hearts of mother-in-laws, but once this same man has reduced himself to bankruptcy and all his costumes and daggers have passed into other hands, he is less to look at than an ill-favored creature who has habitually worn a pongee kimono with plain blue crests or overskirts of cotton. As regards brides, too, those of the aristocracy being a case apart, in commoners' houses a girl who can stretch a wad of silk wool is better than one who strums the koto, and a girl who stokes the furnace when the fire is burning low is better than a mistress in the art of burning incense. Brides look their best when behaving in a manner most suited to their station. So, I mean, that part, I guess, kind of speaks for itself in terms of referencing the expectations in this country a long time ago. What I take from it is someone who figures out how to cover the practical things in life is more valuable than someone who can't do what is necessary and practical, but can do these, other unnecessary things. Like playing fancy music. Like, if you can play fancy music, but you can't think about, I don't know, paying your bills, something's wrong. That's what I take away from that. That's the sliver of goodness that I can pull from that sentence, and I just have to ignore all the other parts because I think they're kind of crappy. All right. The hills of Nara. There, at least, in a world of sham and deceit, is the constancy of the autumn rains falling in their season. Amid the hills, in Kasuga village, there lived a rich merchant named Matsuya So-and-so, who ran a broker's agency for the sales of the Nara bleaching industry. In the old days, his firm was more prosperous than the present Akitaya or Korea, and just as the double cherry in its moment of glory spreads wide its blossom here in the old capital of Nara, so Matsuya passed the spring of life in splendor. But while he spent the days and nights in revelry, merrily feasting on sliced raw shark, washed down with cups of local bitter sake, his business fell steadily into decline, and at the age of 50, when a man reaches the time of wisdom, he suddenly died, undermined by endless dissipation. To his wife and children he left a great many debts, and this was his only legacy. Not until a man dies can we truly know his circumstances. His widow was now 38 years old, but, being a woman of slight build, exceptionally smooth-skinned, and fair in complexion, she passed at a casual glance for 27 or 8. She would still have made an attractive and stylish wife, and with such looks might well have forgotten her duties to the departed and married again. However, her children were still young, and they remained her chief concern. That no one should mistake her intentions, she cut short her concern. That no one should mistake her intentions, she cut short her hair, abandoned white face powder, and left her painted lips to fade. Kimono of manly patterns, and even narrow masculine sashes were her favored garb. But though a woman may surpass a man in intelligence, she cannot wield a mattock, nor is the changing of the decaying supports of a house a task for delicate hands, however skilled. Soon rain seeped through the eaves, and damp growths spread along the walls. To see a wilderness like this growing within one's own home is more depressing than listening all day to the melancholy cries of deer. And that is the entire reason for this video. I love that sentence. I mean, just let's read it again. I really enjoy this sentence. Soon rain seeped through the eaves, and damp growths spread along the walls. To see a wilderness like this growing within one's own home is more depressing than listening all day to the melancholy cries of deer. This is the kind of thing I want to take from this story. I want to be at work one day, and I want to look at someone's code, and I want to say, man, that code is worse than the melancholy cries of deer. What is a person going to say to that? I don't know. I don't know how to respond to that. But I like it. All natural feeling apart, she sadly missed her husband, and she realized now that it was hard for a woman to support a living by herself. Nowadays, if a widow does not remarry, it generally means that her husband has left her a considerable fortune in money and real estate, and that her relations, acting as her advisors in their own interest, have forced her, though she may still be no more than a girl, to crop short her hair, adopt a life of pious seclusion for which she has no mind, and observe with regularity the annual commemoration of her husband's death. Inevitably, she earns a bad name and takes some long-trusted family clerk as a paramour. How often have we seen this happen? Rather than this, it is better for her to marry into some other family at once, and there is no reason why people should mock her for it. In such a world, so you can notice from that last sentence that marriage is considered a very practical thing in feudal Japan. It's considered like almost like getting a college education. It's like, well, I'm an adult now. It's time to start my life, and I need a partner to start my life with because that's the only way we're going to be able to afford it. So let's find a good one. In such a world, Matsuya's widow was an example to all. Though she tried various ways of earning a living, none came up to her hopes. She could think of no method of repaying her husband's debts. As she fell deeper and deeper into distress, she racked her brains for a plan. She offered to hand over her house to her creditors, but they all felt sorry for her, and not one of them would accept it. As for selling the house, she would get less than 3 kanmei for it, and her debts were 5 kanmei. So, begging the cooperation of the people in her ward, the widow decided to dispose of the house by a sweepstake. She charged each participant 4 monmei, and the person whose token was drawn from a box was to receive the house. With a prize like that for only 4 monmei, there was such a mad rush to buy tokens and put them in the box, that before long there were 3,000 inside, 12 kanmei. 5 paid off the debts and 7 remained. With this as a start, the widow once more became rich. A hired servant girl won the sweepstake, and for 4 manmei acquired a house of her own. Yeah! And that is why this story, I guess, is called A Lucky Draw from the World of Greed. And that story was worse than the melancholy sound of deer, or calls of deer. Something like that. Who knows? And let me go and find where I need to put my bookmark. Hope you enjoyed that story. And particularly, I hope that you will realize that even centuries ago, a glance at the world about will quickly reveal that a rich man who is modest in the display of his wealth is a rare phenomenon, and that those who cut a fine figure on slender income are more in the fashion of these degenerate times. Blah! So, save some money and get some cattle. Wear a small hat. That's it. Thank you for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope you will subscribe to this channel if you've never seen it before. It's a good channel. I'll help you get rich. And that is it. Have a fabulous remaining Thursday.